You wouldn't believe me if I told you how it started. That morning, the sky over Chicago was a sheet of slate gray, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to rain or snow. People hurried down Michigan Avenue, heads down, earbuds in, wrapped up in their own world. Just another Tuesday. But not for her. She walked into the towering building at 1440 North Lakeshore Drive like she owned the damn place, because, technically, she did. Though no one knew that yet. Not the doorman who barely looked up. Not the front desk receptionist who gave her that, "Are you lost, sweetheart?" smile. And certainly not the security guard who stretched out a hand to block her as she headed toward the private elevator. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said with a little too much emphasis on the ma'am. "This entrance is for executives only." She paused. "I know," she said calmly. Her voice was low, composed, years of practice keeping emotion tucked behind the throat. Yet her outfit. Slim black trousers, a dark burgundy blazer, no visible jewelry except a small silver cross at her neck. Her afro was neatly shaped, coiled perfection. "No ID badge." "No ID?" he asked, scanning her hands. "Name?" Her lips curled. "Morgan. Morgan James." He squinted at his tablet. "There's no one scheduled." "You're right," she cut in smoothly. "Because I didn't schedule myself." That was her first mistake. Not bringing the badge. She had one, of course she did, but she'd left it at home that morning on purpose. A test. A moment. She wanted to see what kind of culture her company really had. Spoiler alert, it failed. The guard radioed upstairs before she could say more. "Got a woman down here claiming she's, Morgan James? Says she's here for executive access." His eyes flicked to her again. "Want me to escort her out?" She laughed, short and sharp, almost amused. Not the kind of laugh you hear every day. And not the kind you'd expect from a woman who just got told to get lost in her own building. 2 minutes later, a man in a suit walked out of the elevator. Tall, slick hair, ivory smile. You could smell his cologne from across the lobby. Jason Langston, Chief Operations Officer of Onyx Tech Incorporated. He glanced at her with a practiced gaze, trying to place her. Nothing in his expression suggested he recognized her from the quarterly Zoom board calls. Of course not. She rarely turned her camera on. "Hi there," he said, sticking out a hand. "You must be Morgan?" Pause. "Who are you here to see?" She shook his hand briefly. "I'm not here to see anyone, Jason." That caught him off guard. "I'm sorry, have we met?" She didn't blink. "Yes, several times. You just never bothered to look closely." He chuckled like it was a joke, but she could tell he was getting nervous. "Well, listen, I'm afraid this area is for authorized personnel only. We'll need you to." "I know exactly where I am," she said, then tilted her head just slightly. "Let's go upstairs, shall we?" The guard started to say something, but Jason waved him off. "It's fine. I'll handle this." They rode the elevator in silence, just the hum of the city and the quiet tension of the moment hanging in the air. The executive floor was all glass and steel, minimalist design, the kind of place that screamed prestige. They stepped into the open-floor office where a few early arrival VPs glanced up from their screens. Morgan moved past them without a word and walked straight into the CEO's private office. Her office. Jason followed, now clearly agitated. "Okay, look, I'm gonna need you to explain what this is. If this is some kind of protest or investor stunt." She turned to face him. "Jason, I'm not a protester. I'm not an investor. I'm your boss." He laughed. Like really laughed. "Excuse me? I own this company." Silence. He blinked. "That's not possible. You're not on the board." "I'm the majority shareholder," she said, calm as a lake before a storm. "I founded this company 15 years ago, under a different name in a different state. You joined 8 years ago after our second acquisition." He stared at her like she had grown another head. Wait, Morgan James? That name isn't on any of our founding." "Because I changed it," she said. "After everything. After what happened with Sable Dynamics." Jason's eyes went wide. No one talked about Sable Dynamics anymore. It had been wiped from the internet. A cybersecurity firm caught in a whistleblower scandal so volatile, it nearly sunk half a dozen people's careers. Back then she'd been known as Regina Morgan, the rising star. The genius coder turned CEO who blew the whistle on her own board for laundering through defense contracts. And disappeared. She watched him put it all together. The stories. The rumors. The lawsuit. The headlines. "You're her," he whispered. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'm her." That's when the room finally caught up with itself. One of the assistants came in, her eyes wide. "Mr. Langston, She's telling the truth. The bank verification just came in. She's the primary account holder on the executive fund. She owns 52%. Jason turned pale. But that was just the beginning. Because when a black woman walks into her own company and gets told to get lost, you better believe that was never going to be the end of the story. That was just chapter 1. And trust me, things were about to get a whole lot messier. They say power is quiet. That it moves without noise, like a whisper behind closed doors or a signature on the final page of a contract no one reads until it's too late. But that morning, power walked across a glass floor in 4-inch heels, trailed by the echo of shock and confusion. Morgan sat down in her own chair. The chair she'd designed. The one she'd chosen from a handcrafted Swedish collection before the company had even gone public. Leather, dark oak, sleek and understated, just like the woman herself. But now it had been reupholstered. Moved 2 feet to the left. As if someone had made it their own. Jason Langston was still standing, blinking like a man trying to wake up from a dream that was quickly turning into a nightmare. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then sat across from her with the awkward hesitation of someone realizing they'd just told a queen to step off her own throne. Morgan rested her fingers on the desk, calmly. "Where's the rest of the team?" she asked, her tone sharp but smooth. "Call an emergency board meeting. Now." Jason reached for his phone but paused. "They're not all in yet. It's early." She gave him a look. "Then tell them to wake up. Something tells me they won't want to miss this." 10 minutes later, the boardroom was half full. Suits, pencil skirts, polished loafers, and the unmistakable smell of tension. None of them recognized her. Not yet. She could see it in their eyes. That subtle look of appraisal people give a stranger in their territory. Some smiled out of habit. Others stayed cold. But no one asked who she was. Because no one wanted to look stupid in front of the others. Jason cleared his throat. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to." "I'll introduce myself," Morgan said, standing up. She stepped to the front of the room, facing the semicircle of confused and curious expressions. "My name is Morgan James," she began. "Though most of you wouldn't recognize that name. You might remember Regina Morgan. The woman behind Sable Dynamics. The one whose company burned so yours could rise from the ashes." A silence dropped like a pin into the room. She let it linger. "I changed my name. Left the spotlight. Moved through shadow capital networks and shell firms until I was ready to start again. I built Onyx Tech under a different LLC and slowly transferred assets until I became the majority owner, quietly, legally, and strategically." Gasp. Shuffling chairs. Someone whispered, "She's bluffing." Morgan raised a remote and tapped a button. The large screen behind her came alive, displaying a timeline. Company names. Acquisition dates. Cross-linked ownership documents. Everything. I've held ownership through proxy firms for the last 7 years. And as of last quarter, I control 52% of voting shares. Meaning as of right now, this room, this company, this future, it's mine. She paused. No more decisions without me. No more hiding behind outdated bylaws and buried clauses. No more Jason Langston parading as acting CEO while sending quarterly bonuses to himself and pushing diversity hires out the back door. Jason stood up. "That's slander." "No, Jason," she said, tilting her head. "That's a forensic audit." She tapped again. On the screen, a PDF file with redacted employee names, payout records, HR complaints, and offshore account summaries. Jason's face drained of color. The room cracked into chaos. Board members whispering. One of the junior partners flipping through emails on his tablet. Someone even laughed out of pure disbelief. Morgan stayed still. She let the noise rise and then pierced it with her voice. "I didn't come back to be liked. I came back because I built this company with my bare hands, and I will not watch it be gutted by opportunists and paper kings." A woman near the end of the table finally spoke. Her voice was clipped, corporate. "Let's say we believe you. What's your goal, Morgan? A seat on the board? A payout? A title?" Morgan smiled without humor. "I'm not asking for a seat," she said. "I'm taking the whole damn table." Jason laughed, too loudly. "You think you can just walk in here and reclaim power? This isn't a movie. There are procedures, legal ramifications, SEC oversight. I've read every policy. I wrote most of them." He kept going. "You think people will just accept this? That the press won't come after you? That shareholders won't riot once they hear the company's been under secret ownership by someone with your history?" She narrowed her eyes. "You mean someone who took down a corrupt board? Someone who sacrificed her reputation to protect national security while your friends were pocketing defense kickbacks. He froze. Then the room stilled. That's when Diane Parker, CFO and one of the oldest remaining execs, leaned forward. Her voice was slow, careful. "Morgan," she said, "what exactly are you planning?" Morgan turned off the screen. Stepped back into the light. "Clean house," she said. "Restructure from the ground up. Bring in the people who deserve to be here, and remove the ones who don't. No more exploiting interns. No more fake DI reports. No more burying innovation under red tape just to protect fragile egos." Pause. "And yes," she added, voice like steel, "I'm putting myself back in charge." Silence again. Then Diane nodded, almost imperceptibly. Jason stared, lips tight. "You'll regret this," he said under his breath. Morgan looked at him. "No, Jason. You'll regret not seeing it coming." As the meeting dissolved, Morgan stood alone at the head of the table. She could feel it, just under the surface. The pushback. The resentment. The fear. But also, the shift. A crack in the wall. The kind of crack you could push a wedge into. The kind that, if you were patient, could bring the whole damn tower down. And Morgan James? She wasn't here to build bridges. She was here to burn what was broken. 1 floor below, HR was already whispering. 2 floors up, legal was scrambling for clauses they'd missed. And across the city, in a co-working space in Hyde Park, someone opened an email with the subject line, "She's back." They all thought this was about revenge. But it wasn't. This was about reclamation. And Morgan had only just begun. The rain had started by the time Morgan left the boardroom. Not the kind that cleans the air, but the kind that drips slow and bitter from a sky too tired to storm. Gray washed over Chicago like a film, making everything look just a little more distorted. A little more sinister. She walked past the executive floor like she owned it, because she did, but the stairs said otherwise. They didn't see a CEO. They saw a woman who had just lit a match in a room full of gas leaks. Every hallway was a pressure chamber now. Eyes flicked up from screens only to flick back down the second she passed. Even the assistant who'd confirmed her status earlier seemed more cautious, like she'd said the wrong name in a prayer and summoned something ancient. Morgan didn't flinch. She knew what came next. Jason wouldn't sit quietly. Men like him never did. The Jason Langstons of the world didn't lose gracefully. They whispered. They plotted. They rallied the old guard. And then they struck when they thought the room had forgotten. So Morgan didn't wait for them to come. She went first. Her first stop was HR. She walked into their office like a hurricane wrapped in velvet. Samantha, the HR director, white, crisp blouse, mid-40s, Botox smooth brow, stood up quickly, obviously already briefed but pretending otherwise. "Ms. James," Samantha said with a tight smile. "We weren't expecting." "That's the point," Morgan said, not sitting. "Pull every complaint filed in the last 18 months. Harassment. Discrimination. Retaliation. I want unredacted copies. No summaries. Originals only." Samantha blinked. "That's highly irregular. We usually have legal process those. Then have legal send them. You've got 2 hours." She turned and left before the woman could find the words to argue. Next stop, IT. The server room buzzed like a hive, cold and white-lit. Morgan met with Rajiv, head of cybersecurity, someone she'd personally poached years ago under a false name. He hadn't recognized her yet, and she didn't blame him. People rarely remember the architect when all they see is the frame. "I need internal surveillance access," she said plainly. Rajiv scratched his head. "I mean, we have protocols, encrypted servers." "Raj," she said, dropping the familiarity like a brick, "I built the encryption software you're using. I also coded the first-gen firewall we sold to the government. Don't quote me policy." He stared. And slowly, respectfully, nodded. By 3 p.m., she had access to more than half the building's internal servers. Email logs. Door entry timestamps. Security footage. Slack messages. Every whisper the company had tried to bury was now in her lap. And that's where she found the first bullet. A folder. Encrypted. Buried under a random project subdirectory in a shared network labeled Vendor Compliance 2021. She cracked it in 12 minutes. Inside, a cache of confidential memos between Jason Langston and a shadow consulting firm called Alabaster Bridge, an external optimization agency that specialized in transitional leadership strategy. In plain English, corporate assassins. The kind of group that helped remove inconvenient executives quietly. Leaks, smears, undermining campaigns disguised as employee unrest. The kind of people you called when you couldn't afford a scandal, but wanted someone gone. Morgan leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on the screen. He was going to try to erase her. Not legally. Not even physically. But publicly. And in this world that was worse. Destroy her reputation. Paint her as unstable. Use her sable past as proof. Leak just enough old headlines, skew the narrative, then drown it in white-collar noise until the stockholders screamed for blood. That was the game. And now, it was her move. She stood up, called her driver, and left the building through the underground exit. No elevator. No parade. No witnesses. That night, her car pulled into a small townhouse in Bronzeville, modest, quiet, untraceable. Inside, an old wooden desk, a laptop, and a file folder labeled Phase 2. She'd prepared for this. Of course she had. You don't fake your own fall and return to the world of corporate warfare without having contingency plans stacked like dominoes. And Morgan didn't just play defense. She predicted the offense. She opened the file. Inside were 3 names. David Ross. Tina Caldwell. Marcus Dunn. 3 former employees. 3 whistleblowers. 3 ghosts of Jason Langston's past. All had been terminated for performance issues. All had filed HR complaints, never investigated. And all had received quiet settlements, with airtight NDAs. But Morgan had something stronger than NDAs. Loyalty. She picked up the phone and called the first number. A man answered. Morgan? His voice cracked. I thought you were. I know. I need your help. Pause. I'm in. The next call, Tina. She answered on the second ring. Morgan, holy, are you back? Fully. I'll drop everything. Just tell me where. Last call. Marcus. This one took longer. He didn't answer. But she didn't hang up. She left a message. They think they buried us, Marcus. But we were the roots. Call me. Morgan hung up. Closed the folder. Back at Onyx HQ, Jason was already in damage control mode. Emails were being drafted. An internal memo was being polished. One line at the top in bold, Leadership Transition Initiative. That's what they were calling it. A polite execution. Morgan stared out the window, watching the rain blur the streetlights. Her fingers curled into fists without even realizing. They still didn't get it. This wasn't a comeback story. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about truth. About legacy. About showing the next little black girl in a computer science class that no one gets to tell her she doesn't belong. Not HR. Not Wall Street. Not Jason Langston. She was the owner. And she was done asking for permission. Tomorrow the war would begin. But tonight? She sharpened the knives. At 7 a.m., before the city had fully stretched its arms awake, the first headline dropped. Former whistleblower behind Sable Dynamics returns as hidden owner of Onyx Tech. By 7:07 a.m. it was trending on X. By 7:20 Morgan's phone had 36 missed calls. 24 from reporters. 4 from ex-board members who hadn't made the cut. 1 from her mother in Detroit who said simply, "Baby, you done lit the match, haven't you?" Morgan just smiled. She hadn't leaked the story herself. That would have been too obvious. No, she had passed it, carefully, precisely, to David Ross. The first of the 3 ghosts. The man who'd once written the code behind Onyx's proprietary AI system and was later fired for intellectual property disputes, when he questioned their real-time employee surveillance practices. Now, David was a senior analyst for an independent tech ethics watchdog called Core Directive. A quiet group with a loud reach. One call to their editorial contact and the dominoes fell. The article was detailed. Too detailed. It wasn't just a puff piece on a black woman reclaiming power. It had files. Documents. Emails. Shareholder charts. A breakdown of shell corporations tracing back to Morgan James. Even side-by-side comparison images of her from the Sable scandal days and now, dressed in her burgundy blazer, walking confidently into her building. Onyx's building. Her building. By 8 a.m. CNBC was on it. Corporate espionage or power move? Inside the surprise return of a disgraced tech founder. By 8:15, Jason Langston was pacing in his glass office, red-faced, tie loosened, barking orders over Bluetooth to PR. She blindsided us, he yelled. How the hell did this happen? Who leaked those files? PR had no answers. Legal said they were still assessing options. HR was panicking. One assistant cried in the bathroom. Morgan. She was at home drinking tea. Her face never once appeared on live camera. She refused interviews. Issued no public statement. Let the chaos spin itself into a frenzy. She understood something most of them didn't. In silence there is power. Let them project, assume, spin their narratives. Every click on those articles was another stone laid in the foundation she was rebuilding beneath them. By 9 a.m. the investors started calling. Not to complain. To confirm. They didn't care about scandal. They cared about profit. And Morgan James had a reputation, not just as a rebel but as a rainmaker. The woman who built 2 tech empires from the ground up. The only founder in recent memory to survive a whistleblower explosion and keep her shares. Now she was back and the world wanted to know, what was she planning? Jason issued a weak internal memo at 10:12 a.m. We at Onyx Tech are committed to transparency and ethical leadership. The recent news reports mischaracterize the situation and include inaccuracies regarding ownership and executive decisions. We ask all employees to remain focused during this time. It read like denial. Morgan smiled when she saw it. She forwarded it to Tina Caldwell with 2 words. He's flailing. By 11:30 a.m. she arrived at Onyx HQ. No underground garage this time. She walked straight through the front doors in full view of the cameras, press, and phones aimed like weapons. 100 flashes followed her. She wore white today. Symbolism mattered. Inside, the office had turned into a panicked beehive. HR was locked down. PR's faces were drained of color. Jason was nowhere to be found. But the board? They were waiting. She'd called for an emergency shareholders summit the night before, citing her controlling interest and recent instability in executive management. She walked into the glass-encased summit room like it was Judgment Day, and for some, it was. The first face she saw was Diane Parker. The second? Surprise. Marcus Dunn. He'd shown up. Former director of operations. Fired after he refused to sign off on illegal data scraping contracts hidden in back-end vendor deals. Blackballed from the industry for 3 years. And now, he stood beside her like a soldier returning home. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she played the video. 1 click. Jason's voice echoed across the room. We're gonna starve her out. Float rumors she's unstable. I've got Alabaster Bridge prepping a sequence. 3 staged leaks over 5 weeks. First one's personal, family, past, maybe that old DUI her brother got when they were kids. Paint her reckless. Then we hit phase 2, board disloyalty. We make it look like she's losing internal support. Final phase is the kicker. Internal audit leaks that imply fiscal mismanagement. Never confirmed. Just implied. The SEC never needs to step in. By then she'll be begging to sell her shares just to protect her name. The silence after the video was like a scream. One man swore under his breath. Another covered his face with his hand. Diane? She simply exhaled and said, Jesus Christ. Morgan finally spoke. That's what he planned. Against your majority shareholder. Against the founder of this company. Against the woman who built this empire while men like him tried to carve it up like a corpse. She looked directly into the camera live streaming the summit. Yes, I changed my name. Yes, I disappeared. But I never stopped building. I never stopped believing this company could be better than the system that tried to destroy it. She turned to the board. You wanted leadership? You've got it. Then to the investors on the call screen. You wanted returns? I'll deliver them. And finally to the employees watching across every floor, on every silent laptop screen in the office. You wanted the truth? Here it is. The vote came fast. Motion. Remove Jason Langston as acting CEO. Result, passed. Unanimous. Motion. Reappoint Morgan James as CEO with immediate effect. Result, passed. 7 in favor. 1 abstain. Jason walked in 10 minutes later. He saw the room, saw the live stream, and saw the cold finality in Diane's eyes. Jason, Morgan said softly, security will escort you out. I suggest you take only what you came with. He didn't fight it. He just stared at her. Not with rage, but with something deeper. Fear. He had underestimated her. They all had. But now, the world was watching. And Morgan James wasn't hiding anymore. By the end of the week, Jason Langston was gone. Not just fired, erased. His name removed from directories, bio stripped from the website, access terminated across every system. His office was locked by Friday afternoon, contents boxed and archived per protocol. To the press, he issued a 2-line statement through a third-party law firm. I wish Onyx Tech continued success under Ms. James' leadership. My time there is over. No further comment. But Morgan knew Jason. That kind of silence? It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And she could feel it. In the floor. in the way conversations stopped when she walked into a room, in the slight lag between emails sent and responses received from team leads who used to practically grovel when speaking to her title. Jason was gone, but his fingerprints weren't. The rot had sunk deeper than she expected. She called her new chief of staff, Tina Caldwell, into her office late Friday. "I want a full audit," Morgan said. "Internal messaging, cloud backups, Slack threads, everything from the last 60 days. Tina raised an eyebrow. "You think something's still moving?" Morgan nodded slowly. "I think Jason didn't work alone." Tina didn't hesitate. "I'll get the team." Quietly. That same night, Morgan went home, poured herself a glass of whiskey, and pulled out a manila folder she hadn't opened in 10 years. Inside, everything the world forgot about Regina Morgan. Photos. Handwritten notes. Court documents from the Sable Dynamics trial. A resignation letter that was never submitted. And one other thing. A worn Polaroid of 4 people. Jason. Diane Parker. And a fourth face. One she hadn't thought of in years. Elijah Boone. He'd been there at the start. The first investor. The quiet backer who wrote the original seed check when Morgan was just an ambitious dropout with a prototype and a pitch deck. Elijah wasn't flashy like the others. He hated public attention. But he had a gift, he could see potential before it bloomed. And for years he'd kept her company alive in the shadows. Until he vanished. No drama. No scandal. Just disappeared from the company's ecosystem around the same time Jason started climbing. Morgan held the photo up to the light. Elijah had warned her once. "Don't let a man like Langston near your garden. He'll offer to water the flowers, but he'll salt the soil when you're not looking." She hadn't listened. And now the soil was poisoned. The audit came back Sunday morning. Tina brought the report personally. Morgan skimmed the first page. Then stopped cold. Encrypted folder discovered on internal Slack server. Titled, Project Nightshade. She read faster. The folder had been shared among a group of 5 senior staff members. Hidden behind dummy subchannels named after company departments. Inside, documents, strategy decks, behavioral analyses, psychological profiles. Of her. Projected stress responses. Email language pattern breakdowns. A labeled timeline estimating her breakpoint window. Mock drafts of HR letters citing instability. Even suggestions for how to manipulate the board if she resisted. Tina whispered, "They were trying to push you out by force of perception." Morgan closed the file. "They were preparing for war," she said. "Not a takeover. A character execution." But then something else caught her eye. A 6th name. One that hadn't appeared in previous files. D. Parker. Morgan looked up sharply. "Diane?" Tina hesitated. "We thought maybe someone spoofed the account, but her login activity matches." For a full 10 seconds Morgan couldn't breathe. Diane Parker, her ally in the boardroom. The woman who'd supported her in every vote. The only executive who hadn't fought her rise. And yet, her fingerprints were all over Nightshade. Morgan stood pacing. Check access logs. See if she edited or just viewed the files. But deep down she knew. Diane hadn't just seen it. She helped write it. The betrayal twisted in her stomach like a rusty nail. She flashed back to 15 years ago, Sable's fall. The boardroom vote. The surprise motion to remove her as CEO after the leak. Diane had abstained then too. Neutral, she claimed. Too close to both sides. But maybe neutrality was just betrayal with better manners. Morgan stared out her office window. Below, the city moved like it didn't know someone's world was collapsing. She didn't rage. Didn't cry. She'd done all that before. Instead she made a call. "Find Elijah Boone," she said to Tina. Tina blinked. "What?" "Find him. I want to know where he went, why he disappeared, and if he's still got his shares." Tina left, confused but compliant. Morgan sat down. Opened a new email. To D. Parker. Subject, coffee? The message was short. "Let's not do this the corporate way. Let's talk. Just us." She hit send. No plan. No strategy. Just truth. A gamble. Because before she burned another bridge she needed to know. Was Diane truly the Judas in her house? Or was she a hostage to a bigger lie? That night, a black car pulled up outside a small jazz bar in West Loop. Morgan was already inside, seated in the back, nursing an old-fashioned and facing the door. At 8:17 p.m., Diane walked in. Alone. Their eyes met. And just like that, the next chapter of the war began. Not with a bang. But with a conversation. Diane walked through the dimly lit bar like a woman who'd been summoned to judgment. It was one of those old-school jazz spots tucked away in a narrow alley, the kind with appealing sign, brass lamps, and the smell of burnt sugar and cigar smoke clinging to the walls. It was the kind of place where secrets could hide in saxophone solos and nothing ever showed up on Instagram. Morgan had picked it deliberately. A neutral battlefield. Diane slid into the booth opposite her, didn't bother to order a drink. Just looked at Morgan like she already knew what this was about. "Before you say anything," Diane began, her voice calm but weary, "yes. I saw the Nightshade files." Morgan didn't blink. "Saw them? You edited them." Silence. The band in the corner kept playing. Low, sultry. Something in E minor. Diane sighed. "You think I wanted any of this?" Morgan leaned forward. "I think you made a choice. And I want to know why." Diane paused, fingers brushing the rim of the water glass in front of her. "When Sable fell," she said slowly, "I lost more than just a job. I lost my spine." Morgan said nothing. "I stayed on with Onyx because I believed in what you started. I really did. But then Jason took over. Quietly at first, then louder. And every time I tried to push back, it cost me. Budget cuts. Project freezes. I was one bad vote away from being shut out completely." She looked up. "You disappeared, Morgan. You left us to clean up the blood." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "I didn't disappear. I was forced out. You know that." Diane nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry I didn't fight harder back then. But by the time you came back, I'd already compromised too much. I thought maybe I could steer things from the inside. Limit the damage. That's why I abstained in that vote to reappoint Jason last year. I was trying to stall." Morgan swallowed the bitter taste in her mouth. "You were trying to play both sides. I was trying to survive." The music paused. The silence that followed felt louder than the sound. "I didn't write the Nightshade strategy," Diane added. "But I didn't stop it either. And I read every draft." Morgan stared at her. "You were the one person I thought hadn't sold me out." Diane's jaw tightened. "You want to hate me? Go ahead. But I did what I had to do to keep the lights on, for myself and for the people I could still protect. Not everyone gets to be the hero in their own story, Morgan." Morgan didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into her coat and slid a folder across the table. "Elijah Boone," she said quietly. "You remember him?" Diane froze. Her face said everything before her mouth could. "I thought so," Morgan said. "He went dark right before Jason's first restructuring. His equity disappeared into a holding company 6 weeks before he resigned. Guess whose name shows up on the transaction as a consultant?" Diane looked away. "Yours." Morgan leaned in. "You helped remove him." "I didn't know what Jason was planning," Diane said. "I swear. I thought Elijah wanted out. He was tired. Said he wanted to retire and get away from the noise. Jason offered to handle the paperwork. I just signed off." Morgan shook her head. "You didn't just sign off. You helped hide the paper trail. You signed the shell firm documents. You helped move the shares." Diane's voice dropped. "I didn't know what I was signing." "You should have." They sat there just breathing for a moment that felt like an hour. Then Diane asked the question. "What happens now?" Morgan looked her in the eye. "You're going to fix it." Diane blinked. "How?" "You still have access to the silent partner network. The ghost shares, the hidden vote blocks that Jason used to manipulate the last 2 quarters. You're going to help me identify the rest of the collaborators. I want everything. Every name. Every vote. Every back-channel deal." Diane hesitated. "And in return?" she asked. "I won't bury you," Morgan said softly. "You help me clean this house, and when I rebuild it, if you're still standing, I'll give you a seat at the real table." Diane laughed, bitter. "You always did know how to negotiate." "No," Morgan said. "I know how to forgive. Don't make me regret it." Diane nodded once. They finished their drinks in silence. That night, as Morgan rode back home through the rain-slicked city, her phone lit up. A known number, one new message. "He's alive. Elijah. But he's hiding. Not just from the board. From something bigger. I'll explain when I see you next. D." Morgan's blood ran cold. Something bigger? She pulled open her laptop the moment she got home, opened the folder on Elijah and scanned the timeline again. Then she saw it. A transaction timestamp, one she'd missed before. Elijah's final asset transfer hadn't gone to Jason. It had gone to Alabaster Bridge. Her breath caught. Jason hadn't just hired them recently. They'd been involved since the beginning. Meaning this wasn't just about a power grab. This was a long con. one that stretched back years. And now, Morgan was walking straight into its mouth. The next morning, Morgan didn't show up to the office. She didn't send an email, didn't check her messages. No cryptic statements to the press. For the first time since reclaiming Onyx Tech, she vanished. Because she had somewhere else to be. 3 hours outside Chicago, past the flat line of cornfields and into the wooded reaches of Michigan's upper back roads, there was a cabin. No address listed, no mailbox, just a gravel path that split off from a dirt road like a secret handshake. That's where the coordinates led her. The ones Diane had texted the night before. The sun was setting as she pulled up. The place was modest. Stone chimney, old porch swing, smoke curling from the back like someone was still cooking the same way they had 20 years ago. A dog barked somewhere in the trees. The air smelled like pine and dust and something older. Morgan stepped out of the car and knocked once. Then again. Nothing. She was about to knock a third time when the door creaked open. And there he was. Elijah Boone. Older now. Gray beard trimmed close, eyes sharper than ever. He didn't look surprised to see her, just tired. Well, he said, leaning on the doorframe. Took you long enough. Morgan didn't smile. Why did you disappear? She asked. Elijah stepped aside and motioned her in. The cabin was filled with paper. Notes, diagrams, flash drives, maps. An old laptop sat open on the table, screen lines burned into the monitor from years of overuse. I didn't disappear, Elijah said. I was erased. Morgan raised an eyebrow. By Jason. Elijah shook his head. Jason was just a puppet. A distraction. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder thicker than any Morgan had seen yet. Stamped across the front, Alabaster Bridge, Internal Operations. Morgan flipped it open, and immediately froze. Inside, photos, contracts, payment ledgers, and a network diagram. At the center, a name she hadn't seen before. Avoncore Holdings. A private equity firm based in the Cayman Islands. Unremarkable on the surface. But Elijah had traced their tendrils through a dozen acquisitions, shell companies, and political donations. Who are they? She asked. Elijah looked her dead in the eyes. They don't just fund corporations. They control narratives. They buy failing companies, install internal chaos, strip them for IP and patents, and use firms like Alabaster Bridge to create scandals big enough to drown oversight. Morgan's stomach twisted. You're saying Onyx was a target? Elijah nodded. From the beginning. Sable Dynamics was just the first domino. They knew what you were building, defensive AI that could disrupt predictive analytics and surveillance contracts. They needed to destroy your credibility so they could replicate your tech without regulation. He tapped a chart. When you blew the whistle on Sable's internal corruption, they didn't just kill your career. They bought Jason Langston. Then Diane. Then a dozen more. They didn't want the company dead. They wanted it controllable. Morgan stared at the names. Executives. Politicians. Lobbyists. Some she recognized. Others, she couldn't believe. You knew all this, she whispered. And you didn't warn me? I tried, Elijah said. But once they flagged me as unstable, I had two choices, disappear or be discredited. They had everything. Old college infractions. Dated relationships. They even paid someone to leak a fake harassment claim. The only reason I'm still free is because I had leverage. He pointed to a small safe under the floorboards. Inside is the only copy of the predictive ledger. The one that proves Avoncore is orchestrating financial collapses to seize ownership of strategic tech. Morgan was silent. Then something clicked. The leak, the one I gave to David Ross. What if they wanted that to happen? Elijah nodded slowly. Exactly. Now the world's watching you. If you fail, it confirms their narrative, that whistleblowers are unstable. That black women can't lead. That justice always comes with a cost too high to repeat. Morgan's fists clenched. So what do we do? Elijah leaned forward. We finish what we started. But not through their system. We burn them down from the inside. He slid over a USB drive. Everything you need to take them apart, one layer at a time, is in here. But once you open this door, Morgan, there's no walking back. They won't just come for your company. They'll come for you. Personally. Legally. Maybe physically. Morgan took the drive. You think I came this far to stop now? Elijah smiled. Just a little. No. I think you're exactly who they fear. That night, Morgan drove back through the woods with the windows down, the cold air biting her cheeks, her mind spinning faster than the tires. She wasn't fighting Jason anymore. She was fighting a hydra. And to kill a hydra, you didn't strike the head. You struck the heart. Back in Chicago, Diane texted her one word. They know. Morgan didn't reply. She knew what that meant. She'd been marked. Across the city, in a glass tower with blacked-out windows, a different boardroom came alive. Screens flickered. Calls went dark. Someone whispered, "Activate Protocol Black." And just like that, Morgan James became a threat not just to Onyx Tech, but to the entire empire built on controlled collapse. It happened at 3:13 a.m. A ping. One of those soft, harmless sounds that would have gone unnoticed any other time. But Morgan wasn't sleeping. Not anymore. Not since she returned from Elijah's cabin with the USB drive still burning in her coat pocket. She was up, eyes scanning security logs, tracing access points, building a digital wall behind every backdoor the company had ever forgotten to close. The ping came from Tina's system. At first, Morgan thought it was routine, an automated backup running late. But the file path was wrong. It was a remote echo, bouncing through 3 IP masks and 1 TOR gateway. Someone had just accessed the internal surveillance logs. From the outside, Morgan's heart stuttered. She triggered a trace. The connection splintered like dry wood under pressure, but not before she got the signature. It was familiar. Too familiar. Her hands trembled as she checked the source device ID. Tina Caldwell. She stared at the screen. Couldn't move. For a few seconds, she convinced herself it had to be spoofed. Someone stealing Tina's credentials. Phishing maybe. But deep down she already knew. This was no accident. She picked up her phone, called Tina directly. No answer. Second ring. Voicemail. By the third, she wasn't calling anymore. She was running. Morgan's car flew down the Eisenhower Expressway as the city still slept. She reached Tina's building in Oak Park in 24 minutes flat, breaking every speed limit on the way. The doorman recognized her, eyes wide. "Ms. James? Spare me the small talk. What unit?" "7th floor." But she was already gone. Morgan pounded on the door. No answer. She reached under the mat. Found the key. Tina always joked about being old school that way. The apartment was dark. Too quiet. No signs of struggle. Except the laptop was still open on the dining table. Still hot. She stepped closer. A single email sat drafted, unsent. Addressed to a burner account. Subject line, contingency triggered. Morgan scrolled down. What she read turned her blood to ice. A full dump of Elijah's ledger file. Access logs. Names. Dates. An attached internal memo Morgan hadn't even sent yet. One that revealed her plan to call a global press conference in 48 hours. A whisper campaign was about to become a war cry. And Tina? She was preparing to silence it. Morgan didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just closed the laptop and sat down, feeling the weight of every calculated trust she'd ever placed. She'd brought Tina in from the cold. Believed in her. Now, she wasn't just betrayed. She was compromised. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. No voice. Just a recorded clip. Jason Langston's voice. "Thought you were smarter than this, Morgan? But you just keep trusting the wrong people. This was never about you reclaiming a company. It was about you starting a fire big enough that we could burn you for real. You want to play in the dark? Welcome to hell." Click. She stared at the phone. Then stood up and ran. Because this wasn't about corporate takedown anymore. This was about survival. By 6 a.m., her apartment had been breached. Security footage showed 3 men in suits using agency-level lockpicks to enter. They didn't steal anything. They installed things. Listening devices. Signal scramblers. Digital wiretaps. Morgan watched the footage in her car from a parking lot in Lincoln Park, heart hammering. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted her to know. To feel the pressure. To watch the walls close in. She opened a secure channel to Elijah. Encrypted message only. "I've been burned." Tina flipped. "I'm going dark. Send coordinates. And tell Diane, if she's still clean, we move the timeline." The reply came 2 minutes later. Understood. Trust no one. Protocol Raven. She'd only activated Protocol Raven once before. During the Sable scandal. It meant, go to ground. Dismantle from outside. Morgan pulled out a burner phone, tossed her primary into the lake, changed clothes in the back seat, cut her hair in the mirror of a gas station bathroom and drove north, into Wisconsin, into the backwoods, into silence. The next 48 hours were a blur. She lived in a safe house Elijah had once used during his whistleblower trial. She accessed Onyx's systems through a string of public library IPs. And from there she did something she hadn't done in years. She coded. Not polished corporate code, but raw, disruptive, weaponized code. A digital kill switch, designed to expose every thread Alabaster Bridge had ever pulled. Every fake company. Every fabricated scandal. Every name. But she couldn't activate it from the outside. She needed physical access to Onyx's mainframe, the one hidden behind 5 floors of biometric security and ironclad NDAs. She needed to go back. But not as herself. As a ghost. On the 3rd night, she received an alert. Someone at Onyx had just logged into the system using her old credentials. But it wasn't her. She tapped into the cameras. And there, moving through the halls like she belonged, was Tina. But her face was off. Stiff. Tired. Not smug. Not victorious. Almost guilty. Morgan watched her step into the server room and place a folder on the table. A note scribbled on the front. I was never working for Jason. I was working for them. I didn't know how deep it went. I'm sorry. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled the fire alarm, evacuated the building, and walked out into the street, arms raised, surrounded by flashing red lights. Morgan stared at the screen. It wasn't an apology. It was a distraction. She replayed the feed. That folder Tina left behind? It contained the last administrator passcode. The one Morgan needed. But it also meant something worse. Tina wasn't a villain. She was a prisoner. Someone else had pulled her strings. Morgan whispered to the screen, "You were trying to save me? But now it might be too late." Because while Onyx Tech burned through chaos and scandal, Haven Corps was already moving on to their next target. And Morgan had one shot left to stop them. Midnight. Rain soaked the city like grief, washing through the gutters, smearing reflections in the windows of 1,000 buildings pretending not to rot from the inside. Morgan moved through it like vapor. No badge. No ID. Just shadows. Her hair was cropped close now. Glasses she didn't need. A forged access pass pulled from an old friend in cybercrime who owed her more than one favor. She approached Onyx Tech through the service entrance, loading Dock 3. It was rarely monitored. Jason had once called it a legacy door. Morgan had installed it during Phase 1 construction, under a dummy maintenance contract nobody ever bothered to audit. She scanned the badge. The door buzzed open. Inside, silence. The building was mostly empty, emergency protocol still in effect from Tina's fire alarm 2 nights earlier. But some stayed behind. Security. Night shift engineers. A few vultures pretending to hold the company together while the world waited for her next move. They didn't know she was already inside. She moved like a ghost, floor to floor, dodging motion sensors with paths she'd memorized years ago. Every wall had her fingerprints under its paint. Every camera angle, every blind spot, every panel she'd hidden in the architecture while the world applauded the fake kings on the front page. She reached the mainframe vault at 12:22 a.m. Biometric locks. Retina scan. VoicePrint ID. None of which belonged to her anymore. But the admin pass Tina had left behind? That was the backdoor key. Morgan slid the encrypted drive into the interface slot. The screen flickered. Then welcomed her home. Admin access granted. Welcome back, founder. She didn't smile. There was no joy in vengeance. Only clarity. She uploaded the Raven protocol, code built to trace, extract, and publish every record connected to Haven Corps' manipulation network. It wouldn't crash systems. It would do something worse. It would reveal a data hemorrhage set to upload to 4 major news outlets, 3 regulatory agencies, and 1 untraceable whistleblower site within 60 seconds of trigger. But before she hit execute, something caught her eye. A secondary system booting. One she hadn't activated. It was a remote session. Someone was watching. And then, a voice came through the speakers. I hoped you'd make it back. Morgan's blood went cold. She turned slowly, eyes sweeping the shadows behind her. Nothing. You were always the wild card, the voice continued. Mel, come. Smooth like velvet over broken glass. They told me you'd stay quiet. Settle down. Let the company burn and walk away with a golden parachute. Morgan stepped away from the terminal. Who are you? Silence. Then the voice laughed, low and cruel. Don't you recognize me, Morgan? A hiss. A door behind her opened. And in walked Jason Langston. Alive. Breathing. Smiling. Not the bitter man she'd destroyed in the boardroom. Not the red-faced executive who'd threatened her over voicemail. This Jason was composed. Serene. Like a man who'd just been unshackled. Morgan's voice was ice. You're supposed to be gone. Jason walked toward her, no hesitation. I was never gone. I was promoted. She stared. He gestured to the screen. Do you really think I ran this little game on my own? I was a seed. A placeholder. A curated villain. He stepped closer. And you? You were the hero they needed defeated. Morgan's mind raced. What is this? She demanded. A confession? No, Jason said. A transfer of power. He pulled out a small device and pressed it. The lights flickered. The terminal blinked. Her access froze. Connection interrupted. System breach detected. External override. Jason watched her panic for half a second, then smirked. You think you created this company. You think you built this code. But everything you made, every line of defense, every algorithm, every infrastructure point, was replicated. Duplicated. Owned. Morgan lunged forward. Too late. The terminal went dark. She spun around, heart pounding. Jason didn't move. You brought the truth, Morgan. But truth without control? He smiled wider. Is just noise. Morgan clenched her fists. You're working for Haven Core. He shook his head. I am Haven Core. The words dropped like ash in her mouth. You? Jason leaned in. They offered me a deal years ago. I said yes. I made them billions. But I always knew it would come down to one of two things. You'd either join us. He paused. Or you'd have to be erased. Morgan stared at him. You won't get away with this. Jason grinned. I already did. Then, a second voice echoed from behind. No, you didn't. They both turned. Diane. She stepped into the vault, her gun drawn. Morgan blinked. What the hell are you doing? Diane didn't take her eyes off Jason. Cleaning house. Jason laughed again. You won't shoot me. Try me, she said. Morgan moved first. She launched into Jason, knocking the device from his hand. They struggled, fist to elbow, knee to ribs. Years of buried rage exploding in a confined space. Jason swung wildly. Morgan ducked. He slammed her against the terminal. But Diane moved in fast. Gun to his temple. Enough. Jason froze. Breathing hard. I don't need you dead, Morgan said, voice tight. I just need you offline. She grabbed the device. Reconnected the drive. The system rebooted. Jason growled. You'll destroy everything. No, Morgan said. I'll expose it. And she hit execute. 60 seconds. That's all it took. Every secret. Every black ledger. Every fake identity and offshore account. Gone from the shadows. Now, flooding the world. Screens across the country lit up. Newsrooms went to DEFCON 1. Government agencies scrambled. And Jason Langston? He slumped to the floor, stunned. Diane cuffed him with zip ties. Guess you're not CO anymore. Morgan didn't smile. She walked out of the vault, the rain now pouring through the glass atrium above. And for the first time in a long time she felt light. Free. But she knew better. This wasn't the end. This was just the torch lighting the fuse. And somewhere beyond the fallout, Haven Core was watching. It happened faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Morgan activating the Raven protocol, the world caught fire. News anchors scrambled to process the scope of the leak. Dozens of global corporations, household names, were suddenly tied to financial manipulation, data harvesting conspiracies, hostile takeovers, and off-the-record blackmail operations. At the center of it all, Haven Core Holdings. And threaded through the digital paper trail like veins through a living heart. Onyx Tech. The fallout was seismic. The SEC opened an emergency investigation. Whistleblower protections were activated across 5 continents. 2 tech CEOs resigned within 48 hours. 3 board members from Haven Core vanished from public view. And Jason Langston? He was in custody by Monday morning, charged under federal RICO statutes. They tried to spin him as a rogue agent, a bad actor, a one-man operation who went off script. But Morgan had receipts. The kind you can't bury. The kind that rewrite entire industries. The world now knew who she was. Not just Morgan James, the black woman who walked back into her company after being told to get lost. She was the whistleblower who wouldn't die. The architect of a revolution no one saw coming. But the deeper truth? She wasn't done. Not even close. She stood in the ruins of what she'd reclaimed, knowing there was still one final piece left to face. Because Haven Core didn't die with Jason. It adapted. The next move came wrapped in a white envelope. No postage. No return address. Just the name Regina handwritten on the front in blue ink. Morgan opened it carefully. Inside, a letter. You did well. Impressive even. But the truth you exposed is only one layer of the game. We never wanted the company. We wanted the blueprint. And we got it years ago. Your leak was expected. Necessary even. Chaos opens markets. Scandal moves currency. You think you won, but all you did was shift the board. Let's talk. We're ready to bring you in, for real this time. HC. Morgan read it twice. 3 times. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from something deeper. Rage. Not because they were still alive, but because they still thought they could recruit her. That night she called Diane. We're not done, Morgan said. Diane's voice was steel. Agreed. They met in the same jazz bar where the confession had gone down. No music tonight. Just low lights and the thrum of power about to shift again. I want to rebuild Onyx, Morgan said. Not just as a company. As a firewall. A real one. Diane frowned. What do you mean? Morgan slid a folder across the table. Think of it like this. What if the world had a tech company that couldn't be bought? One with full transparency. No silent partners. No shadow funding. A new kind of infrastructure, AI enhanced but accountable. Ethical. Protected. Impossible, Diane said. The system would never let it stand. Then we don't ask permission, Morgan said. We build outside the system. Decentralized. Crowdsourced. No single point of failure. And we don't own it. Diane blinked. Who does? Morgan leaned back. Everyone. It was bold. Risky. Borderline suicidal in corporate terms. But it was real. A weaponized truth engine. And Haven Core? They couldn't stop what wasn't for sale. By the end of the month, Morgan launched the prototype, Project Ghostlight. The first open-source tech firm designed to expose corruption, not just profit from silence. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't monetized. But it worked. Her inbox filled with leaks. From Silicon Valley to Seoul. And for the first time in her life, Morgan didn't feel like she was chasing justice. She was justice. Then one final moment. At the press conference, a young reporter raised her hand. Miss James, she asked, when you walked back into Onyx Tech that day, did you know you'd win? Morgan paused. She thought about everything. The betrayal. The war. The pain. Jason's smug face. Elijah's maps. Tina's sacrifice. Diane's confession. And the fire still burning inside her. Then she smiled. No, she said. I didn't walk in thinking I'd win. She looked at the crowd. I walked in because I already owned it. The room went silent. Then erupted into applause. Not for a comeback. Not even for revenge. But for a truth that refused to die. A woman who refused to disappear. A black CEO who was told to get lost. And came back as the architect of a new world.